On 9 September 1781, General George Washington was in a hurry. As he left Baltimore very early in the morning, he only took his aide, David Humphreys, and a few members of his life guard with him. 60 miles later, he rode up to Mount Vernon, his home that he had last seen in April 1775. But where is the Continental Army? Where are Rochambeau's French forces? As Washington approached Mount Vernon, some 2,500 of his infantry finished crossing the Susquehanna River at Havre-de-Grace, while his artillery, wagon train, and Lauzon's hussars crossed upstream at Baldfriar Ford. The next day, about 1,000 Continental soldiers crossed as well. They had already traveled well over 200 miles from north of New York City, with another 95 miles to go until they reached Mount Vernon. That does not seem much today, but in the 18th century, 95 miles meant an 8-day march for a train of ox-drawn wagons hurrying along at 1.5 to 2 miles per hour. Once they reached Mount Vernon, another 150 miles lay ahead of the wagons and teams, 12 to 14 days' travel before they would reach Yorktown. As Washington hurried south on the 9th, about 2,600 Franco-American forces were boarding vessels at Head of Elk in Maryland, 125 miles north of Mount Vernon. It was only on 12 September, the day the Commander-in-Chief departed his home for Williamsburg, that their flotilla of 80 vessels, the so-called Mosquito Fleet, set sail from Head of Elk for Archer's Hope. As they arrived in Williamsburg in the afternoon of 14 September, cheers by the Marquis de Lafayette's Continental Army troops and the 3,000 French soldiers of the Marquis de Saint-Simon greeted Washington and Rochambeau. Their armies, however, were still stretched out almost 250 miles on water and on land along the eastern seashore of the United States. It was only on 26 September that the armies were encamped in Williamsburg. As the almost 18,000 men strong force set out for Yorktown on the 28th, they entered the last leg of their march to victory that had begun 700 miles and 4 months earlier in Newport, Rhode Island, and in Newburgh, New York. When President Barack Obama signed Public Law number 111-11, 220 years later in March 2009, he created the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail, or W3R. The only National Historic Trail east of the Appalachian Mountains, it stretches from Boston to Yorktown and commemorates the many land and water routes taken by the men of the French and Continental armies to Yorktown and victory. I'm Dr. Bob Selig for York Paths.